Wayne's ready when you are.
All right, it is 6 o'clock, so I guess do we start with roll call now? Roll call.
Benson.
Here.
Gross. Here. Hoffner.
Here.
Iva.
Here.
Miner.
Here.
Mosier.
Here.
Mary Johnson.
Here.
City Manager Nelson.
Here.
City Attorney Denner.
Here.
All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the strategic planning that we did in January and revisit that. And Amy, I know, has put it together in a document for us to digest, so I will let her introduce the subject.
Thank you, Mayor, and I will give that to you in a second. Wanted to introduce this evening by talking a little bit about the process, because I know Bridget wasn't able to be there. Well, she wasn't elected yet. Chris was not able to be there either, and I'm not sure if he's coming later. I think Sarda is, so I haven't heard from either of those two, but we'll update them a little bit. So January 19th and 20th, District 3 was kind enough to facilitate for us a strategic planning process, more or less of an update of what we had previously put together with a facilitator. And we spent a half day with the department heads in District 3. And the other half of the day, the following day, Saturday, we spent with you all, as you know, working on our strategic plan. And we had a lot to do and not a lot of time to do it. Greg is here this evening to help me listen and make sure what I hear is what you communicate, because what I'm going to give you is a draft form. So when I give copies to the public and the press, just to know that it's in draft form until you all are looking at considering it and hopefully potentially adopting it for our work plan going forward. So I'm going to ask a number of questions, but first I kind of want to lead up to how we ended our time. I thought we had got a lot of work done. We talked a lot about a lot of projects. We talked about our mission statement. We talked about what our value is, and we spent a lot of time talking about vision and what is the vision of the city, and what is your vision for our community, and how do we get there. And we had a little bit of a harder, more difficult time kind of pinpointing that, and that was one of the things we thought, well, maybe we should revisit. Since that time, I've had the opportunity to visit with a couple of facilitators, different facilitators, as well as a number of city managers who said to me, you know, if there's a vision out there and it's not defined and pinpointed, that's good. Your vision should be broad and it should contain a lot of things, because if it's too focused, then it's not really a vision anymore. It becomes a goal. So I took that to heart and thought, you know, I'm not going to limit myself to one vision. I want to make sure that we reflect all the visions that you have in our strategic planning document. Greg was kind enough then to provide me with a report, and it was really thorough, and so thorough, in fact, that I was a little bit overwhelmed with it. Basically, everything that we talked about was included in that, and I didn't think that was a very usable plan. And I've heard a lot of people tell me that, you know, it's great to have the report, but you have to have, it's got to be usable. So how can I translate that from planner and facilitator speak into something that you can use and the community can use and understand? So it came to me, as most good ideas do, in the middle of the night. And I think a way that we can express our strategic plan that's easy to understand for you and usable for you. And so I wanted to put that forward in one page in a document that you guys could easily use and facilitate in your discussions with the community. So I went to Kristen Yankton, who works with Dwayne in our GIS department, who recently won a national award actually for her ability to tell stories through pictures and mapping, and I'll talk a little bit about that this evening in the regular planning or regular city commission meeting, and kind of through all my notes and Greg's report and all the post-its, and said, you know, here's kind of what I'm looking at, and the priorities need to match the goals, and the goals need to match mission. Just all got to work together. And she kind of gave me a blank stare, but she's like, I think I can understand what you're not telling me. So I'm going to hand this out, and there's two sides to it, but I'd like to talk to you about this first side first. So I'm going to hand this out the way I'd like you to look at it. And I've got some more copies for the staff and for the public as well. Press has one. Sherry, are you interested? Dave, if some more people come in, maybe hand it to them. So across the top, you have the vision for how we looked out into the future. So you can see there in what kind of looks like pull downs or arrows, paraphrased statements based on what I understood your visions to be. Works together to pursue happiness, has welcoming and safe neighborhoods, has beautiful parks and is an oasis on the Missouri River, has a thriving and vibrant downtown, is collaborative and innovative, is an open and engaging community. So those were all the things that we were trying to mesh into a statement, and I was guided, or at least it was suggested to me, don't try to limit those. Try to expand on those, use all those in what you're trying to do. And along the left-hand side then is the priorities that you all set forward that you said were important. These are what we want to emphasize going forward in the next couple of years. These aren't necessarily prioritized priorities, but rather the things that you mentioned. So I assigned them a numerical number, and I'm going to read them for the listening. I know you're looking at them, but for the listening folks. Quality of life and livability, engagement and transparency, relationships and partnerships, employee recruitment and retention, downtown and riverfront development, community development and planning, growth and neighborhood development, and maintaining and improving infrastructure. To me, those were the things that you guys communicated throughout those days and that the staff communicated that were really important priorities. When I talked with other city managers, they're like, wow, your commission really knows what it wants to do. I couldn't drag 3 or 4 priorities out of my commission. And I was like, really? And I wanted to mention that only because sometimes I think we go away from our meetings and our discussions going, I don't know what Amy wanted us to do here, or we come away going, I'm not really sure what the commission wanted us to do here. But in comparison, a lot of the city managers I spoke to said, that's awesome. They gave you really good feedback to work with. So then we had all these projects. And I showed some facilitators, oh, no, I've already done, a matrix. And I held up that little sheet that you guys worked on a couple years ago that I had staff put together with all the bullet points. And I said, see, I have bullet points here. And then I cross them off when we're done. And they said, no, that really doesn't communicate the full vision and spirit of what a strategic plan is. It needs to combine their priorities and their vision and help people understand how the projects intersect. So that's what you see here. So just, not that it's limited. So, of course, all the projects and plans should probably reflect working together to pursue happiness. But I had to make some definitive answers. But if, for example, you just look at one of them, let's look at has parks and is an oasis on the Missouri River. You can see that's reflective of what priorities in 1, 5, 6, and 7. And so if you go over to the left side, you see it's reflective of quality of life and livability. It's reflective of downtown and riverfront development. It's reflective of community development and planning. And it's reflective of growth and neighborhood development. And then we have some specific projects that we've talked about that we want to get done that will reflect those priorities and help us realize those visions that we have. And these projects will change as we come up with new ideas and have different things come up in our budgeting process, but these are the ones we have now and we're working with. So, for example, public art installation, the lead agency there is being Parks and Rec, and that doesn't mean that Todd and his staff are alone responsible for that. It might be Yankton Area Arts, it might be a partnership with somebody else, but those are sort of the lead staff directions that we're going to take there. So, another example is an open and engaging community. So we have that's reflective of quality of life, livability, which is number 1, engagement and transparency, and then relationships and partnerships, number 3. So increasing citizen engagement and government transparency was something that you told me that we really wanted to work on. And there's a lot of things here. Posting our agendas on social mapping, on social media, crime mapping, live streaming our meetings. We are doing that. Providing more e-services anywhere we can, our body-worn camera program. So those types of things. So to me, this is a way that we can understand how our projects fit into our priorities and goals, as well as the overall broader perspective and vision. So before we flip to the other side, I'm going to start asking you questions because there's a couple of things that I need to know from you all before we end our time today, or at least get some direction from in the very near future. What's missing here? Is this reflective of what we talked about during those 2 days? Is there something on here that should not be? Is there something missing? If there's just one project that you really think, gosh, we really need to make sure that's on there just as a reminder, so our brain ticks it and we continue to focus on that. Certainly tonight would be the evening to tell me that. We also have some internal operational goals, so things that we wanted to work on that, I really wrestled with. And to me, looking at this kind of like a game board, these are kind of the community chest or game of chance squares that you land on sometimes that don't really play into the overall game, but they're important to help the organization or to help win the game if we're talking about it in that sense. Prioritize compensation commitment. So we talked about that, about making it a priority that we compensate and commit to our employees. We talked about automated payroll system again, and then that succession planning and staff mentoring and how important that is internally. So that's a little bit, I guess, on the more inner circle of our organization than it is community-wide, but still valuable. So as you're thinking about answering those questions, I'll invite you to flip over to the other side of this document. So we worked hard on a mission statement, and the mission statement is one that I really thought should be laser focused, and I really thought we got there. I edited this a little bit from what we talked about that day, but that day we talked about our mission statement changing to this: to provide exemplary experiences, services, and spaces that create opportunities for everyone to learn, engage, and thrive. And just from what other people's feedback has been, it's like, wow, you guys nailed that. I'm really happy with that, but we can talk about that later as well if you'd like to make some changes or edits. But I think that's a very strong mission statement and also really supports the priorities and the visions that you have reflected in your work. Also, it was important, I thought, to kind of talk a little bit about what's driving our decisions, some good, some bad, some challenging, some opportunities. The aging infrastructure and equipment, social media and communications, expectations of citizens, limited financial capacity, workforce housing and shortages, and then our desire to move Yankton forward. Also thought it was important to make sure we have on here indication that what's driving us, what's pushing us forward, what do we value here. And these were things that came out last time and were reiterated in January: sustainability, maintenance, seamlessness, self-efficacy, that proof that we believe we can win, service, facilitating growth, and livability. So those are some of the values which we can certainly add to or talk about as well. The last question that I'm going to ask you before we talk, the last two questions before we talk more about this document is this something that you think you could adopt and utilize moving forward? And there's another question too, and it just floated out of my mind. Are you satisfied with the mission statement? I think that's number 2. So think about that when we talk about the picture. So initially I wasn't going to put the picture in there, and when I asked sort of colleagues and contemporaries, why did I put the picture in, a lot of them said, oh, well, you probably put the picture in there because you needed a space filler there in the back. And that wasn't actually why. I didn't get the right answer. But really what I wanted to do is because I want everything in this document to be something you can use, is to make that the visual sort of reminder of this. So I kind of see this as sort of the strategy of coming all together maybe on a sports team. We don't pick each other. Somebody else picks us. I mean, you pick Al and I and Ross, but other people pick you. And so we're all here together kind of playing the game. Sometimes some people are carrying the ball. Sometimes people are sitting on the sidelines. Sometimes people are on the, DL list or whatever. And that's okay. We're all very different. We have different strengths, time and talent that we can provide. But we're all on the same team, and we're also sort of representing the university. So if we're the Mount Marty College football team or Mount Marty College basketball team or whatever team, we're reflecting the whole university or the whole community in everything we do. And so I think while it's just an image and it's an image of us, it's important to do that. If there was a way that we could fly over Yankton and take a picture of all the city employees and all the partnerships and community entities that help us do our work, we would do that. But I wanted to put our picture in here as that reminder and to have you think about that in that way. So with that, I'd like to ask you what's missing, what needs to be added. Is this something that you can utilize? This is sort of a placemat. This was in the spirit of a placemat when you'd go to a buffet somewhere like in the 80s and you'd go there and there'd be a placemat there and you had to read the history of the restaurant because you were done eating and the adults weren't. But so we could use this in front of us and help guide things like our budget. To me, that's what we would do, help guide big decisions. That's how we would utilize this. And if it is, I'd like to bring it forward to you all at a future time to consider adoption, especially in light of the fact that we're coming towards our budget here pretty quickly. So I'll be quiet and we'll listen and hear what you have to say about it and how we would like to change it or make it better.
All right, Amy, thank you for all the work you put into this, and thank you for the introduction. So let's start off at the beginning. Does this reflect the work that we did in January? Is there anything that should be adjusted or added, subtracted?
Well, I just think it's worth mentioning just a little bit of context because, and I kind of want to work backwards from this new mission statement. I think it's worth reminding folks of what the old mission statement is. It's, what's been attached to your emails, Amy, that you send out to us commissioners and members of the public routinely. The previous mission statement was, the mission of the city of Yankton is to provide cost-effective public services as required by its citizens and to provide an environment so that both its citizens and the economy prosper. So the new mission statement, to provide exemplary experiences, services, and spaces that create opportunities for everyone to learn, engage, and thrive. And I know you mentioned you tweaked that a little bit. I just think, aside from this document that you put together for us, I think this is on a scale of 1 to 10. This is an 11 at this point, in my opinion. And I really do think that it's driven by this new mission statement, which I think is spot on and really does represent how far we've come.
And to be clear, I didn't put any of this together. I just went into Kristen and said this and this and that and spun around and said, and I got to get it done pretty soon. And so Kristen's talent here, this is your work and her talent that you're seeing, but I sort of pointed her in the right direction and she's also like, is this what you want? But yeah, I think it's nicely done, and this was nicely put together with Greg's help guiding us that day. I think it's a good mission statement.
So Tony, I think you make a good point. This mission statement reflects the evolution we've seen in public expectations of what we do. We hear more and more we want spaces to do things, we want opportunities to play, learn. And so I think the commission hears that every day, and so I think this mission statement reflects that. So while we're on that subject, does anyone else have any input on the mission or vision statements? All right, so let's go back to the other one. Does anyone have any changes they would like to make? Is this reflective of what we did in January? This is good so far. Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, while you're looking at it too, I'll just add that I put to 2020 because also when I was showing drafts of this to colleagues and to other facilitators, they're like, you didn't do a year of work here. You did like 3 to 5 years of work here, and some of the projects are going to fall off and you're going to add projects, but that structure is pretty good. You may not need to do a revisit again in 6 months because this was, in May, and I knew I wasn't going to be presenting till almost June. So that's another question too. But yeah, take a look. It's a little bit difficult at first to kind of see how it reads, but once you get used to it, And you could split hairs on which priorities to assign, but at one point we just had to say, okay, it has an element of this, let's put it here.
And I would just say, so looking at this, is it worth noting, unless I'm missing something, that these priorities are listed in no particular order, or are they currently designed as this is priority number 1, 2? Do we know? You know what I mean?
You all didn't prioritize them in a certain order, like quality of life is more important than engagement and transparency. While you may think that, these are just a list, a numerical list, and a way to assign. It could be A, B, C, D, E, F.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I wasn't very clear, and I'll point it out here again. But let's just say, for instance, under this arrow here, so works together to pursue happiness, and then commission priorities. So the priorities of the commission starts with quality of life, and then the bullet points there, and then water treatment plant, water distribution, modeling update, and then so on across. So in no particular order then
Correct.
are these priorities
Correct.
being listed.
And we can do that if you'll help me prioritize them, but that might be another session. But no, the projects are also not in any particular order, and I think they'll provide a framework where perhaps next year I'd like to maybe half of these to come off and some of the new ones being put on, or maybe some of them won't fit anymore into what the commission wants to see or community needs, and then maybe they'll come off by virtue of that.
I'm looking at the report that we got after the meeting, and employee recruitment and retention was a priority, and I'm not seeing it right here.
Well, we put that under, I kind of thought that was a hard animal to wrestle with because that's twofold. So I felt like we talked about in the context of our organization, also, and then also in the community. So I kind of wanted to put that under the supporting the workforce development strategies that our community will have that will play into our organization, but also, prioritizing commitment to our employees, compensation, succession planning, mentoring. Tried to roll some of those things together, but I'm glad you pointed things like that out, because I did things like that in the document because I couldn't put all those words onto this sheet.
Right,
But
so it really is another vertical line. You just ran out of space, so you did it horizontally.
no, well, I guess I felt the internal operational goals were a little bit different than the vision for the community. So that was one where we talked about a long time. How do we handle that? Because, these are internal things that will make our organization stronger. And in doing so, I think we can better realize our vision. If we have a stronger, if our bones are stronger, we're going to be able to run a little longer. So that's kind of how I thought about that. I don't really know that that's a vision more as is like kind of a housekeeping. We got to get our house in order type things. But we can change that. I need to get a bigger piece of paper then, or make it smaller.
Yeah, no, it's there.
I think this is awesome. I think it's easy to read, and I love things that are bulleted, and it's not really wordy, because I think people would spend time reading this. My only caution would be, and I know sometimes you can't get away with it, but we hear it a lot in higher education. We use a lot of acronyms. And if this is a goal to use this externally, I would be careful of that, because I even... silly me, and it's probably my fault, but I leaned over to Ross and I said, implement PM code. What does that mean? Are you all going to tell me what time I have to go to bed at night? Which would be great, because then I'd have some rule and order in my, thank you. But he had to tell me that meant property management. So yeah. I see how we want to, maintenance, sorry. Right. So I understand that we sometimes have to abbreviate. Maybe most people understand what WCLR is and things like that, but that was one where even I, sitting here, had to ask for clarification. Yeah. So I know you can't list anything out, but I would just see if there's a way in some of those trickier ones that
and maybe maybe we can do a little better job at that, or even have a key. I think primarily this will be something that we use to communicate to the community, but it's a public document and it'll be on our website, so I don't want people to be like, what is this, how am I supposed to uncrack this code? It's not, because again, one of our visions is being open, transparent, and if people think we're, if people can't understand it, it's not transparent. But I think she did a great job putting it together, and the report is good, and we need the report, and we'll refer to the report that Greg put together, but it's just not, probably, I'm not going to use a report like I can use something like this.
So under has beautiful parks and is an oasis on the Missouri River. If you go down to the bottom, collaborate on improving sports facilities, fields. We list Fox Run, the Mount Marty Field House, and the SAC. I would want us to add something about community sports groups, something along that line, because we're constantly having conversations with groups about improvements to their
Soccer,
facilities.
and yeah, that's a good.
So I'd want that reflected.
That's a good suggestion. We can definitely do that.
I too would like to echo the other comments of the other commissioners about the document. I think it's good that we can see much in one view, and pretty good. I guess since my steamboat didn't make the chart,
No, I don't.
but
I didn't
I
put the
think,
steamboat.
maybe it will next year. I think the airport, I don't know where it belonged, but I think it's just worth the conversation. It's just incredible asset we have with hundreds of acres of land to be developed into some sort of aviation-related business, and we have the capacity at the airport, which is a multi-million-dollar complex paid for by at least 90% FAA funds. And FAA likes to see that kind of thing. We utilize their money put towards a good cause. So I don't know if that belongs. I know it's more of I know we have it on one of the priorities for IPG, but if there's somewhere honorable mention or whatever.
Yeah. So when you said airport, I went down this left-hand list and I thought, well, that's quality of life and livability. That's maybe employment and recruitment retention. It's certainly community development, planning, growth, and neighborhood development. So perhaps that's maybe something that could be under.
As long as it's there, I think at least we can look at it.
Can find a
keep
place
in
for
mind
that.
We do have some capacity there for definitely further economic development.
Right, and what my hope would be is to bring this forward for consideration for adoption, so that when we get into the heavy lifting of the budget in August, this is alongside of you. And if it, some of these projects are already, we know we'll be budgeting for. Some we may not this year, some may be next year, but at least you're using those priorities and this vision to say, is that support what we're talking about here, or is that kind of off the mark? And do you feel like we would need to, revisit this fully again in next year, or can we wait, the additional year before we, understanding that some of these projects may interchange, or there may be new projects coming in and out?
When Jake mentions the airport and economic development, do we need more in here about like the archery park and different economic development focuses that we have? That's the one area where I'm having trouble really finding our priorities for it. And maybe it's because we didn't discuss them a lot in January, because we discussed them a lot of other times a year, but it's just something that I think maybe we should look at.
Well, and when I hear the archery one, I think of the fact that it is economic development and tourism, but it has also been a real collaborative and innovative way of approaching economic development and tourism, so that may fall underneath there. But we can certainly maybe put some of those elements into it, incorporate some of those elements into it. Archery, where we have partnerships, the airport, that's one of our, and some of our other economic development pursuits. Downtown is one of those economic development engines as well. And because that's such an important area for the commission, I think that that's one of the reasons why that had its kind of own vision and priorities, had some priorities related with it. But sure, and under working together, that definitely comes into that. So we can look at some of the expansion on that. Workforce is one of those strategies, I think, as well, and housing. So, but we can play with it a little more and see if we can fit some of those things in.
One thing I noticed is missing is Todd promised he was going to grow some money trees.
Yeah. To replace the ones we cut down, yes. We're going to grow money trees. Yeah. Those we'll work on that. But so if I don't hear anything else, what my intention will be is to make some edits to this, get it in a commission packet for future consideration, and then probably laminate some for you all to have access to up here at the dais, and then of course make it available to the public. And to me, it will go in my binder sort of that I have every day and take with me to pull out and utilize and look at. And I might make placemats for home.
Amy, one of the things I would request is if we think of anything else after tonight, because I don't have my notes from the January
Sure.
meeting in front of me, so I might want to go back and compare it to what I might have wrote down. Not that you're not thorough, Greg, I wasn't saying that, but just to kind of see again what I took away
Sure.
from that and compare what kind of time frame would you want if there was any feedback that way?
What I would like to do is probably have this before you at the June 11th meeting, because we have our June 18th budget meeting coming up. So not imperative, but if you had them by, sometime before June 11th, we can incorporate those, and that'd be useful to me as well. And some of the, again, like Charlie pointed out, some of the things I wasn't, you and I hear the same thing and hear different things. So I took kind of like, even in the report, when I was like, well, that's not, yeah, I said that, but that's really not how I said it and what I meant. So everyone will have a different interpretation. So I'm definitely, this is your guys' document. So, and again, if there's one specific project that comes out of the budget too, I'll probably ask for the flexibility to say, put that in here. If there's some project we don't yet know about that at the budget, you guys say, absolutely, yes, we have to do this. We should put that in as well. I don't know if the staff has any comments. Their names are listed all over this thing. I didn't share it with them before. Reflective of what we talked about when we were together with Craig and Eric. I should mention that they did this with, is incorporated as part of our contract, and we didn't pay anything extra, so we got more than what more than worth our time and effort and investment in District 3, as we always do. And Kristen does a great job helping visualize what we want to communicate. So I don't have anything else.
What are people's thoughts on revisiting this in January?
I would, first of all, thank you for the incredible amount of work. I like the way you have collaboratively sort of teased out and verbalized the commission priorities. It was an incredibly positive discussion, and this reflects that positivity, I think. In listening to you speak about it and in looking at the octave of priorities, my sense is that the priorities will probably stay the same. But like you said, we'll probably be moving and changing some things on the list. It's hard for me to think of a priority that's not on that list. Of course, that can change, but so it would be a revisit, shifting some things around.
Yeah, and perhaps that's something we can revisit as a commission. I don't want to put Greg on the spot. Maybe they can help us facilitate that in terms of projects, and not necessarily investing a lot of money and trying to recreate a strategic plan again.
I guess I would be in favor of revisiting on probably an abbreviated version, like a morning or something, just to go over the priorities and tweak I think we have a pretty good document. I don't think we need to go through the whole course again next year.
To me, the timing to do that too is maybe not January 1, because we're just starting a new budget year. So to maybe the time to do that is the springtime when we're planning for our budget. And I think maybe there's a little less work to do. We could probably do that maybe in conjunction with our CIP, because over time, I think our CIP, it's still valuable discussion, but because we communicate a lot more through the different channels we have, I think we can do that a little more succinctly and maybe spend a little more time, because this really helps us develop that document as well.
Amy, and so staff met the day before when we met, so if it would be a good idea for us to meet, I guess I'd like your guys' opinion if it'd be a good idea for you and your staff to kind of go through this next year also.
I think so. I think part of what's really valuable for us is, having that time together to talk about some of the things that are the priorities and trends that are driving the decisions, and to talk about maybe a broader understanding of, not just what, but why. So I think regardless of what we choose to do, it sounds like we're going to get back together here, but we'll take advantage of District 3 to have that time together and talk about those projects. And it's a good time for us to do team building. A lot of times our staff meetings end up being a kind of a mad dash of what do we need to get done right now and what's coming down the pipe, and we don't spend that time kind of talking larger and broader. So plus I feed them so they show up.
Food always helps. Is it your intention then to show this to the rest of, I would assume, the day before you met with department heads? Is it your goal to show them this before we would get a final version
Yes,
as well?
so
in case
I wanted
something
to
they
talk
took
with
away?
you all first, and then what I wanted to do, and I shared it with Al already because he was, the staff person that was there with me. What I would do is I would take it to a staff meeting, probably give it to him even before and say, we'll talk about this at our staff meeting. Can you understand it? Can you figure it out? If they're like, what the heck, then it's not useful either. But this will help guide them as well. And to me, it's something I'd want them to share with their staff. Not that every level of every employee needs to understand how everything works together, but they should at least understand, hey, this would be this mission statement. This is how we do our work. This is what our purpose is. This is why we're here. So, to provide exemplary experiences. So when someone comes up to the counter saying, hang on a minute, I'm on the phone, isn't living up to our mission. It's standing up and saying, hey, how can I help you today? Good morning. Thanks for coming in. Those types of things. So relating it back to their staff in the appropriate way.
And I would just quick second the idea of having anything happen around springtime of next year. And I can just speak from my experience of when I came on the commission. So that was April of a couple years ago, but the strategic planning had already happened in January, and so I would just think that, let's say next year, new faces or face on the commission, I think it'd be really advantageous to kind of time that out. And so like a Bridget this year to have been able to go through, maybe not like you're going to be able to command the crowd while you're at this, but just a really good opportunity to deep dive and review. And especially now, I think this has worked out really well because I know a lot of work had to go into this document, but to think about next year where it won't be as intense, but it'll be a really good opportunity to get folks up to speed.
Timing has always been a little bit awkward because there's 1 to 2 to 3 people who weren't involved in communicating that, so they're like, well, so I think that it would be probably timed around the end of April conveniently with, maybe the first CIP budget, and when we at least maybe don't have them installed but elected, so we know who we're working with. Okay, I took 40 minutes of your time, so I don't have anything else unless you have other things of me.
Commissioners, any other questions?
We'll work on this, and I'll take your comments, and I'll have Kristen help me make the changes.
All right, can we have a motion to adjourn? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Those who are opposed, thank you very much. We are adjourned.